The wind carried dust across the Kansas prairie the day Ezra Vance walked into Millbrook with nothing but a bedroll, a busted hat, and 3 years of a past he wasn't ready to talk about. He'd worked cattle drives, he'd dug wells, he'd buried a man who called himself a friend and left before anyone could ask him why. All he wanted now was honest work, a place where nobody knew his name and nobody needed to. He found the farm at the edge of town, fences leaning, fields half-plowed, a barn missing half its roof. A woman stood in the yard, sleeves rolled to her elbows, a hoe gripped tight in raw hands. "I need honest work," Ezra said. "That's all I'm asking for." She looked him over, the way a person looks over a horse before buying it, not unkindly, just careful. Then her shoulders dropped, like something in her had finally given out. She glanced back at the house, at the curtain twitching in the window, where 2 small faces watched without being seen. "I don't need another hired hand," she said. Her voice dropped low, almost lost beneath the wind. "My children needs a father." Ezra didn't move. He didn't breathe. What happened to her husband? Why would a widow whisper something like that to a total stranger? And what would Ezra do now? Stay close, because what happens next will stay with you long after this video ends. If it does, tap like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Her name was Ruth Calloway. Her husband, Thomas, had died the winter before, thrown from a wagon on a frozen road, his neck broken before anyone found him. She'd been alone since, raising 2 children and 300 acres that were slowly swallowing her whole. "I didn't mean it the way it sounded," Ruth said quickly, color rising in her cheeks as if she were only now hearing herself. "I meant the children. They need someone steady, not another drifter passing through for a meal." "I'm not asking to be their father," Ezra said. "I'm asking for work. That's all." Ruth studied him a long moment. Behind her, a boy of about 10 watched from the porch, arms crossed, wary as a fox. A smaller girl peeked from behind his shoulder, one fist knotted in his sleeve. "The note on this land comes due after harvest," Ruth said finally. "I can't pay you in coin till then. Room in the barn, meals at my table, and a fair share when the wheat's sold." "That's more than I've had in a year." She nodded once, sharp, like she'd already decided, and only needed to hear herself say it out loud. "Daniel, Mary, this is Mr. Vance. He'll be helping us through planting." Daniel didn't uncross his arms. Mary didn't come out from behind him. Neither did Ezra expect them to. That night, lying in the hayloft listening to the wind rattle the broken shingles above him, Ezra Vance wondered what kind of man agrees to build a stranger's whole life back up from nothing. He didn't have an answer. But for the first time in 3 years, he wasn't running from anything. He was walking toward something. The work came first. Fences needed mending before cattle needed keeping. Ezra rose before sunrise, worked till his hands blistered, and said little. Daniel tested him constantly, leaving chores half-finished, watching to see if Ezra would run to his mother with complaints. Ezra never did. He simply finished the work himself without a word, sweat cutting clean lines through the dust on his neck. It was 3 weeks before Daniel finally asked, "Why don't you tell her when I don't do my share?" "Because you're not mine to punish," Ezra said, not looking up from the post he was setting. "You're hers. I'm just here to help carry the load." Daniel didn't answer. But the next morning, the fence posts were already set before Ezra reached the field. Mary came around slower, the way shy children do, a wildflower left on the porch step, a question asked from a safe distance, a small hand finally reaching for his during a Sunday walk to church. Ezra held it like it might break. Trust, he was learning, wasn't a door that opened all at once. It was 100 small doors, each one needing a different key. Mary's fever came in early June, sudden and frightening the way fevers do in small children. Ruth sat up 3 nights straight, cool cloths and quiet prayers, while Ezra rode 12 miles in the dark to fetch the doctor from Caldwell and 12 miles back before dawn. He didn't sleep those 3 nights either. He sat outside Mary's door with his back against the wall, listening for her breathing to steady, ready to ride again if it didn't. On the 4th morning, her fever broke. Ruth found Ezra still there, hat in his hands, eyes red from lack of sleep, "You didn't have to stay," she said. "Yes, I did," Ezra answered, and they both understood he didn't mean out of duty alone. Mary called him by name for the first time that week, not Mr. Vance, just Ezra, and something in Ruth's guarded heart loosened another notch. But not everyone in Millbrook approved. Silas Pruitt owned the land bordering the Calloway farm, and he'd wanted Ruth's acreage since before Thomas was cold in the ground. He'd bought her note quietly from the bank the month after the funeral, and he didn't take kindly to a stranger standing between him and foreclosure. "Folks are talking," Pruitt said one afternoon, reining his horse up beside the fence Ezra was mending. "Unmarried man, widow woman, alone on that farm together, ain't decent." "I sleep in the barn," Ezra said, not breaking his rhythm with the hammer. "Don't matter what's true, matters what people believe." Pruitt's smile held no warmth in it at all. "Might be easier on the widow if you moved along. Might be easier on you, too." Ezra straightened, met his eyes without flinching. "I've been run off better places than this." Pruitt's smile thinned, and he rode off without another word, dust settling slow behind him. The whispers followed them to church that Sunday. Ezra felt it the moment he stepped through the door, heads turning, voices dropping, a few of the older women pulling their skirts aside as Ruth passed with the children. Nobody said a word to her face. Nobody needed to. Ruth kept her chin level the whole service, singing the hymns like she hadn't noticed a thing. Only Ezra saw her hands shaking around the hymn book. That night, Ezra told Ruth what had been said. She listened at the stove, jaw tight, a wooden spoon stilled in her hand. "He's wanted this land for years," she said. "Thomas refused to sell. I'll refuse the same. He holds your note now, same as the bank did." "I know what he holds." Her voice cracked, just slightly, just once. "I don't know how I'll pay it if the wheat doesn't come in strong." For the first time, Ezra saw the fear underneath her steadiness, not weakness, but the weight of carrying a whole household alone for a year with no one to share it. And for the first time, he wanted more than anything to be the one who made sure she never had to feel that fear by herself again. The prairie fire came in July, the way prairie fires always come, sudden, roaring, indifferent to plans or prayers. It started on Pruitt's land, some said from a careless pipe, others said from lightning with no rain behind it. It didn't matter how. What mattered was the wind, pushing a wall of orange straight toward the Calloway farm, toward the fields Ruth had planted with everything she had left. Ezra didn't think. He grabbed every wet sack and blanket in the house, sent Daniel running to warn the neighbors, and worked the fire line until his hands were raw and his lungs burned with smoke thick enough to taste. Ruth fought beside him, beating flame from the fence line, while Mary stood safe at the well 100 yards back, screaming for her mother to come away. They saved the house. They saved the barn. They lost 2 acres of wheat to the black smoking ground, but only 2. When it was over, Ruth sank against the well, soot-streaked and trembling, and Ezra knelt beside her without asking permission, holding her steady while she shook. "We almost lost everything," she whispered. "You didn't," Ezra said. "I wasn't going to let that happen." She looked up at him then, really looked, the way she hadn't let herself before. Something passed between them that neither one said out loud. But 3 days later, something else came to light, something that threatened to undo it all. A letter arrived from Ezra's old employer in Abilene, addressed to Silas Pruitt. Ruth found out because Pruitt made certain the whole town found out first. Ezra Vance, the letter claimed, had left his last job under suspicion of stealing cattle money. No charges, no proof, only whispers, the kind that can ruin a man who has nothing else left to defend himself with. "Is it true?" Ruth asked him directly, the children long asleep, lamplight flickering low between them. "I didn't take anything," Ezra said. "The money went missing. I was the last man paid that week, so I got the blame. Nobody proved it because there was nothing to prove. But nobody believed me either, so I left before it got worse." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I've learned that once a man's suspected, the truth stops mattering to most folks." His voice was low, raw at the edges. "I didn't want you doubting me before you'd had the chance to know me." Ruth was quiet a long moment, studying his face in the lamplight. Then she said the thing that mattered more than anything Pruitt had written. "I know you. That's enough." The truth came out the way truth often does, slowly, then all at once. The foreman from Abilene, hearing that Pruitt was using an old rumor to run an honest man off his land, rode 2 days to set the record straight himself. The real thief, it turned out, had confessed months earlier to another crime entirely, in another county. Ezra had never been guilty of anything but bad timing and worse luck. Pruitt's scheme collapsed under its own weight. Without scandal to drive Ezra off, and without the town's sympathy left to lean on, his hold on Ruth's note grew thin. A rancher 3 farms over, hearing the whole story, offered to buy the note himself and let her pay it fair after harvest, same as they'd always planned. Ruth accepted before he'd finished asking. The wheat came in that September, gold and heavy, more than enough to clear the debt and set something aside besides. Ezra stood at the edge of the field the evening it was finished, watching the sun drop low and orange over land that finally, truly felt like something worth staying for. Ruth found him there. Daniel and Mary ran ahead through the stubble, laughing, freer than Ezra had ever heard them. "You came here for honest work," Ruth said softly. "I did." "Did you find it?" Ezra turned to her, and for once, he didn't measure his words before he spoke them. "I found more than I came looking for." Ruth smiled, the first easy, unguarded smile he'd seen from her since the day they met. "Then maybe it's time you slept somewhere warmer than the barn." They were married the following spring, in the small church at Millbrook, the same church where whispers had once trailed Ruth down the aisle, now filled instead with neighbors who came bearing pies and handshakes and no shortage of apologies nobody asked for. Daniel stood tall beside Ezra at the front, solemn as any grown man could manage at 11 years old. Mary scattered wildflowers down the aisle, stopping halfway to fling a whole handful at Ezra's boots instead, grinning up at him until Ruth had to hide her laugh behind her glove. Silas Pruitt didn't come. Nobody missed him. What began as a stranger's search for honest work had become something neither of them had dared to hope for. A home, rebuilt not by chance, but by choice. One earned day at a time, one small door at a time. Years later, when Daniel had grown broad-shouldered and Mary had grown into a young woman who still kept wildflowers pressed in her Bible, Ezra would still walk the fence line some evenings just to look back at the house. Lamplight in the windows, smoke curling steady from the chimney, a home that had once been half broken and was now simply home. And on quiet evenings, when the wheat swayed gold under a wide Kansas sky, he would remember the words that started it all, words that once sounded like the end of a hard road, but had really been the beginning of everything. "I don't need another hired hand. My children needs a father.